Previously on The Man Behind the Farm.
I can remember my mother getting beat up from the age of 3. That's as far as my memory goes back. Well, in my mid-teens, that's when I started to really feel like I'm a nudist locked up in a clothed body. But I never thought I had anything wrong. But I did become very depressed from the ages of 13 to 15 and very suicidal for those 2 years.
Bipolarity, manic depression, where people have high highs and low lows. And you could say that all of us have high highs and low lows. But the difference between someone who's bipolar and someone who's not, when the high highs and low lows, is there's no external trigger as far as we can tell.
I'm also a director with the Federation of Canadian Naturists. And we would be contacted occasionally by naturist parents who were being investigated, usually for other reasons, or because a spouse was complaining because they were in a divorce situation, that the other was a naturist, or the children would be exposed to nudity, blah, 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 blah. And sometimes they went nowhere, but sometimes you had a worker who didn't fully understand the situation, or because their own bias as to what they thought sexuality was. Something just flew here. Because of their own bias of what they thought sexuality was, they saw sexuality in the children nudity, so they investigated. The problem is we could never talk to anybody because they'd say, well, we can't talk about it because of privacy reasons. You can't talk to parents, you can't talk to anybody. The parents talk to us, we couldn't talk to them. So I contacted the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies and met with the executive director, and she agreed, yeah, that doesn't fit the criteria of abuse in any way, shape, or form. But the problem is sometimes that people who are abusers, who have sexual deviance, use nudism or naturism as the excuse when they're caught. It is normal for a naturist family, to have pictures of their children nude on vacation, just like anybody else would. It is not normal for somebody to have 10,000 pictures of children they don't know. And, that may seem obvious as I'm saying it, but until you say it, it isn't always.
What did they charge you with?
Sexual interference, sexual assault, administering a noxious substance, exploitation, I think. There was a video of after the fact when I had given my son some rum in a cap when he was 2. He came over to me when I was watching TV and he thought I was drinking pop, and he only knew a few words when he was 2. And he kept saying, "Pop, pop." And he wouldn't leave me alone. And I was just sipping it straight out of the bottle. Someone had gave me at Christmas time. I was just finishing up a couple bottles at Christmas time that I had got. And so I decided to make him sort of go away and scare him off from trying to pester me. And I put some rum in the cap and I gave it to him, and he drank it straight-faced. I thought he was just going to freak out and go like this. And he drank it straight-faced, and he said more. So then I turned my camera on and I filmed him running around with his arms in the air, and he's going, ah, because even though it was alcohol, they called it a noxious substance because of the age of the child. And he never got sick. There was no side effects, anything like that. It just lasted about 20 minutes. With my children, what I had filmed, which I totally regret now, of course, that when I was changing the diaper on each one of them, I had set the camera on the floor while they were laying on the floor getting their diaper changed. And each one, while I was filming their diaper change, my daughter, I touched her vagina area and sort of parted it for a second, and then she says, "Don't," and I immediately took my hand away. She was 3.5. And my son, I pushed his scrotum to one side for a second while the camera was running, and that was my sexual assault, sexual interference charges.
Why did you do that? Explain.
It's hard to. I was in a really fucked up state of mind at that point in time, so it's really hard to say why. I never thought of it or planned it. I just thought to myself, as my library of children, my library of my children growing up that I was to be making on video. Because I already had filmed them running around the house playing nude because they were nudists and they weren't doing anything unusual. They were just being themselves. I just thought I should throw a diaper change in each video, but my messed up, super sexualized state of mind I had at that time, especially being manic and bored in the wintertime, that's when deviance started to happen, because being bored and over-sexualized and manic at the same time, I made the step of touching them. It didn't make a diaper changing video better. It's just that I think I was getting like pornographic or pornography sexual thoughts at the same time because the camera was on. It was like I was a monster behind the camera, even though I didn't actually do stuff in the typical way sexual abusers do. My penis was never involved in any crime, and I had no intention of doing anything to them, but I made contact with them while it was on videotape, and that didn't have to do anything to do with a parenting purpose. So it was wrong and it was illegal.
There are multiple definitions or multiple causalities, assumptions about why someone would become a sexual deviant. As you point out, one of the prevailing theories is that people who are sexually abused will go on to be abusers. So you somehow have to intervene in that cycle. However, there's a whole different way of looking at pedophilia that has nothing to do with necessarily someone being abused. And that's that someone gets stuck in an area. In fact, one of the more obvious and literary examples is in Lolita, of a man who, as a boy, at 14, I believe, falls desperate in love with a 12-year-old who's subsequently killed. And because of the intense trauma and attachment and attraction, that he's really stuck there. So he goes on to find sexual stimulation from 12-year-old girls. Now, as a 14-year-old, that's considered normal behavior. As a 40-year-old, it's not considered normal behavior, although you could argue in our society that older men having fixations on younger women is at least understood.
I knew right from wrong to a great degree for big things. I didn't have a comprehension at that time of smaller things for right and wrong. But in hindsight, I think back that the timing was perfect, just like when I got kicked out by my parents, by when I bought the farm, when I got arrested. I had just got my camera, so if anything worse would have happened with the state of mind I had, it got nipped in the bud at the minimum point.
So at the minimum point, saying that you feared that this could have progressed in some way?
In hindsight, I do, but not at the time. At the time, I wasn't coherent enough, or even though I could function and talk and act like a normal human being in some degree, I was in denial. I just couldn't accept that I had done anything wrong.
But so pedophilia is like many psychiatric disturbances. It's a spectrum. It's not that either you is or you ain't. Is Britney Spears, if a 40-year-old man buys Britney Spears albums, or did 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, does that mean he's a pedophile? A little unclear. So it really is a spectrum, and it has to be looked at that way. And the real issue about pedophilia is not, is it possible for us to feel sexual attraction to a person significantly younger than we are? The issue is the exploitation, because children are taught to trust adults, and is it a violation of that trust? So in many societies, what we would consider pedophilia is considered perfectly acceptable. So number one, it's going to be very much culturally determined. Number two, that being attracted is different than acting out. Number three, there is a wide spectrum of behavior here, and the real issue is not the sexuality per se, it's the exploitation.